Backstage banter. Jason Statham slipped through the stage door, the fluorescent hum of late-night banter washing over him like a harsh tide. The backstage area was a contained explosion of controlled chaos. Cables snaked across the floor like metallic vines, half-eaten sandwiches sat precariously on rolling equipment cases, and harried-looking interns darted between dressing rooms, clutching clipboards like lifelines. The air thrummed with a nervous energy, a stark contrast to the calm he usually cultivated. He took it all in with a practiced eye, a silent observer in a world perpetually striving for attention. He spotted Rex Sterling's personal assistant, a young man named Tim, practically vibrating with anxiety near a door marked host. Tim nearly jumped out of his skin when he saw Statham. "Mr. Statham, Mr. Sterling will be so pleased you could make it." Statham merely nodded, his expression unreadable. He wasn't here for Sterling's pleasure. He was here because something felt off, that a gut feeling he'd learned to trust implicitly over the years. Inside the dressing room, the air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and hairspray. Rex Sterling was pacing in front of a full-length mirror, meticulously adjusting his tie point. Two stylists hovered around him like worker bees around a queen. "More volume. Damn it. I look like I've been flattened by a steamroller," Rex barked, his voice tight with pre-show jitters. He caught Statham's reflection in the mirror, and his face instantly smoothed into a practiced smile. "Jason, my man, right on time. Glad you could make it. Add some class to this, zoo." He gestured dismissively around the room. Statham remained impassive. "Just wanted to wish you luck, Rex." Rex preened. "Luck? Pleased that I make my own luck. Tonight, we conquer. Ratings will be through the roof." He turned back to the mirror, obsessively smoothing his stray hair. "Did you see that bit about the Kardashians' new face? Gold, pure gold." Statham had not seen it, nor did he particularly care. He watched as Rex's focus shifted back to his reflection, a silent, almost desperate need for approval flickering in his eyes. That it was a fleeting glimpse behind the carefully constructed facade, a vulnerability that was quickly masked by another layer of arrogance. Meanwhile, near the craft services table, Brenda Chun was cornering a weary-looking producer named Gary. She nervously fiddled with the strap of her messenger bag. "Gary, I'm still a little concerned about the monologue. The Princess Diana jokes, they feel a bit much, even for Rex." Gary sighed, rubbing his temples. "Bryn, honey, it's Rex that he's pushing boundaries. That's what he does. That's why people tune in." "But is it funny? Or is it just mean?" Brenda persisted, her voice laced with genuine discomfort. She'd been wrestling with the ethics of Rex's humor for weeks now, the line between satire and cruelty blurring with each rewrite. Gary shrugged, grabbing a handful of pretzels. "Look, the legal team signed off on it. The network signed off on it. My job is to make sure the show goes on, not to be Rex's moral compass. Besides," he added with a dismissive wave of his hand, "nobody cares about Princess D anymore. It's been decades." Brenda felt a familiar wave of disillusionment wash over her. She knew Gary wasn't a bad guy, just pragmatic. Survival in this industry demanded a certain level of detachment, a willingness to prioritize ratings over personal convictions. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. The laughter she heard echoing from Rex's dressing room felt hollow, almost predatory. That a shiver traced its way down her spine. The monologue. "Welcome back to late-night banter." Rex Sterling boomed, his pearly whites flashing under the unforgiving studio lights. He smoothed the lapel of his impeccably tailored suit, a furtive gesture betraying the nerves he typically concealed beneath a veneer of practiced charisma. The audience responded with a programmed surge of adoration, an oral balm to his ever-needy ego. "And I know what you're all thinking. Rex, darling, how do you manage to radiate such effortless charm, night after night?" The truth, my dears, is a punishing regimen of green sludge and profound, soul-crushing angst. They ate it up. Every syllable. That Rex's signature brand of self-aware arrogance was a reliable ratings draw. Tonight, however, a sharper tang underpinned the usual flippancy, a subtle cruelty lacing his humor. "Speaking of individuals who are perhaps a tad too enamored with themselves," Rex purred, leaning closer to the mic, eyes sparkling with mischief. "Has anyone else noticed the disturbing homogeneity amongst today's action heroes? All brawn, Minimal brain, saving the world with the expressiveness of a block of wood. A wave of mirth rippled through the crowd. I mean, seriously. Try telling me Vin Diesel inspires genuine fear. The man resembles a cherubic infant dressed in concrete. He paused, allowing the laughter to crest and subside, before delivering the next blow. And then there's Jason Statham. God bless him to Mr. I punch bad guys and look grimly determined. One can only imagine the hours he dedicates to perfecting that withering glare. Probably uses it to intimidate his morning granola. Backstage, Jason Statham, typically immune to such trivial barbs, felt an unfamiliar sting of irritation. He'd been passively amused by Rex's usual routine as he waited for his cue, even managing a chuckle at the Diesel quip. But this felt pointed. There was a sneer he hadn't registered before, a dismissive tone that chafed. He fixed his gaze on the monitor, his jaw muscles flexing. The audience, as predictable as clockwork, lapped it up, their delight echoing in the sterile atmosphere. Emboldened, Rex pressed the attack. Seriously, people, what's the deal with the chrome dome? Is it a stylistic choice? An aerodynamic advantage? Does it reduce drag when he's pursuing international terrorists on a personal watercraft? These are the questions that plague me. Rex gesticulated wildly, his gravity-defying hair untouched. And that voice, like sandpaper gargling with crushed glass. Half the time, you can't decipher a word he's saying. A stagehand, beads of sweat forming on his brow, adjusted his headset and shot a nervous glance towards Statham. The air backstage grew heavy, each passing second adding to the mounting tension. Statham edged closer to the screen, his normally placid blue eyes hardening. He wasn't one to take himself too seriously, but boundaries existed, and Rex Sterling was gleefully stomping all over them. This wasn't playful teasing. It was something darker, a venom he could taste in the air, oblivious to the brewing tempest brewing backstage. Rex was in his element, basking in the adulation, intoxicated by the sway he held over the crowd. But hey, he concluded with a playful smirk, at least he keeps the stunt doubles employed. Somebody's got to take those beatings. The crowd roared its approval, a tidal wave of noise that crashed over Rex, fueling his self-regard. Jason Statham turned away from the monitor, his face a study in controlled fury. The trace of amusement had vanished, replaced by a steely glint in his gaze. The atmosphere was thick with suppressed rage. He knew, with a visceral certainty that resonated in his bones, that this was more than just a quest for higher ratings. Rex Sterling was deliberately provoking him, and he hadn't the faintest notion why. The interview begins. The roar hit Statham like a physical force as he walked onto the stage. Blinding lights, a sea of faces, and the amplified frenzy of applause. It was a familiar, almost comforting chaos. He gave a curt nod, the closest thing he offered to a smile, and took his seat opposite Rex Sterling, whose polished teeth gleamed under the studio lights. Rex, basking in the adoration, leaned back in his ridiculously oversized chair. Jason Statham, from diving platforms to, well, let's just say, a slightly different kind of platform. Quite the career pivot, wouldn't you say? The audience chuckled, a pre-programmed response to Rex's carefully crafted condescension. Statham crossed his legs, his movements deliberate and economical. One requires holding your breath, the other requires less of it. He paused for the obligatory laughter, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Rex steepled his fingers. So, the burning question everyone's asking is, what does an Olympic-level diver know about blowing things up? He made a theatrical gesture with his hands, mimicking an explosion. The audience roared again. More than you, apparently, Statham replied, his voice smooth as gravel. I understand physics, trajectory, force. You understand advertising revenue. A ripple of appreciative murmurs spread through the crowd. A current Rex seemed determined to ignore. Touché, Jason. Touché, but surely, you must admit, it's a bit of a stretch. I mean, did you ever envision yourself trading a Speedo for whatever it is you action heroes wear these days? Statham ran a hand over his close-cropped hair. I envisioned myself making a living. The Speedo money wasn't exactly paying the bills. This is. Rex feigned a look of surprise. So, purely a mercenary decision. No artistic yearning. No burning desire to explore the nuances of human conflict through the medium of exploding helicopters. Helicopters are expensive, Statham deadpanned. Artistic yearning doesn't pay for them. Rex leaned forward, his smile tightening. But doesn't it bother you, Jason? All this mindless violence? Isn't there a part of you, the diver, the athlete, the human being, that cringes at the sheer spectacle of it all? Statham's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. There's a part of me that cringes at people asking loaded questions designed to make them look smarter than they are. He kept his voice even, betraying nothing. The audience tittered nervously. Rex, however, seemed to thrive on the tension. Oh, come now, Jason, don't be so sensitive. That it's just a bit of fun. After all, we're here to entertain the masses, aren't we? And what's more entertaining than watching a man who used to gracefully slice through water now gracefully? Well, you get the picture. He winked at the camera. Statham uncrossed his legs, placing both feet firmly on the ground. The light glinted off the steel watch on his wrist. He looked directly at Rex, his gaze unwavering. Entertaining is subjective. I find watching someone make a fool of themselves quite entertaining, but I wouldn't expect them to enjoy it. Digging deeper. Now, Jason, Rex purred, a syrupy tone that slithered down Jason's spine like an icy draft. We've remarked on your varied career path, from Olympic heights to pummeling villains, and now this. He waved a hand at the screen looming behind them. Let's dissect a snippet from your recent dip into rom-com territory. Jason felt his gut clenched. He knew the segment intimately. That cursed scene that he'd strive to bury it, to erase it from existence. But Rex Sterling clearly reveled in exhuming corpses. A cold trickle snaked down his temple. The studio lights felt suddenly oppressive. The screen flared with life, showcasing a moment from Cupid's arrow. A cinematic gamble Jason had hoped would broaden his fanbase. It broadened something. All right. This depicted Jason, portraying a jaded divorce attorney, attempting to charm a whimsical bookseller with atrocious verse. Shall I liken thee to a summer's morn? Jason's on-screen double-intoned, his delivery stiff, almost robotic. The bookseller, embodied by an actress with wide eyes and unfortunate curls, gazed upon him with manufactured longing. Jason grimaced. He could almost hear the collective groan of a nation. His face felt like a furnace. The clip ended, mercifully, snapping back to Rex, who lounged back, a smirk etched onto his features. My, he drawled, stretching the word. Shakespeare weeps. Jason, honestly, did any of that archaic language actually penetrate? A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the audience. Jason's fingers curled into tight fists, nails biting into his palms. He inhaled deeply, clinging to composure. He wouldn't afford Rex the pleasure of a meltdown. Naturally, he replied, his voice taut. It's Shakespeare. Rex arched a brow. Indeed. And you felt that rendition authentically captured the bard's spirit? He paused for effect. You seem to be reading off a shopping list, not declaring undying affection. A few audience members risked open laughter. The sound scraped at Jason's sanity. Pressure mounted within him, a volatile brew threatening to boil over. It was a part, Jason ground out, his tone a low rumble. I was embodying a character with a profound aversion to displaying human feeling, Rex countered. His eyes glinting with mischief, he leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial murmur. Pray tell, Jason, was that before or after your acting guru suggested you channel the emotional range of granite? The room exploded with mirth. Jason's vision blurred red. This wasn't mere teasing. It was a calculated assault, designed to demean, to tarnish his image. He was being goaded, provoked, and Rex was clearly relishing the spectacle. He opened his mouth to retaliate, to unleash a torrent of suppressed anger. But then, he paused. He glimpsed the predatory gleam in Rex's eyes, the hunger for confrontation. That he wouldn't provide the satisfaction. He wouldn't let Rex claim victory. Man on the street. And now, Rex announced, his voice dripping with false enthusiasm, we have a little something we like to call Statham on the street. The studio audience hooped. Jason Statham managed a tight smile, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests of his chair. He hadn't been forewarned about this. He glanced sideways at Bryn, her face a mask of professional neutrality. though he thought he detected a flicker of discomfort in her eyes. The screen behind Rex exploded with jumpy, low-resolution footage that a young woman with bright pink hair was the first victim. The off-screen interviewer's voice, amplified and distorted, barked, "Name 3 Jason Statham movies." The girl blinked, chewing her lip. Wasn't he in Fast and Furious? That's one. The voice chirped, too brightly. 2 more. Silence. She wriggled. I don't know. Something with cars. Cut to a middle-aged man in a business suit. Same question, same glazed confusion. Statham, isn't he that bald guy? Action movies? Expendables. 1 more. He shrugged, defeated. No idea, sorry. The segments continued, a montage of blank stares, mumbled apologies, and guesses so wildly off-base they bordered on insulting. Someone suggested Statham was in a romantic comedy. Another thought he was a celebrity chef. The audience roared with laughter. Statham felt a flush creep up his neck. He was used to being underestimated, used to the critics writing him off as just another action brute. But this felt deliberately cruel. It wasn't just about his acting. It was about invalidating his entire career, reducing him to a punchline. Rex, meanwhile, was having the time of his life that he threw his head back, guffawing. "Oh, Jason, you're just too modest. The people have spoken." They've sort of spoken. Or mumbled incoherently. "Anyway, the point is, you're a man of mystery." Statham forced a chuckle. "Right? A real enigma." His voice was tight. Bryn shifted in her seat, her gaze fixed on the floor. She hadn't expected this. She understood Rex's shtick, playful ribbing, a little bit of manufactured drama, but this felt malicious. She could see the genuine hurt in Statham's eyes, the clenching of his jaw. This wasn't entertainment. It was bullying. The montage ended with a final, devastatingly awkward close-up of a teenager scratching his head. "Jason Statham? Is that a type of cheese?" The laughter reached a fever-pitch. Statham's smile cracked. "Very funny, Rex. Very original." He leaned forward, his voice low. "Tell me, Rex, how many awards have you won for your comedic timing?" Rex's smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second, but he recovered quickly, bouncing back with practiced ease. "Oh, Jason, don't be so sensitive. It's all in good fun. Besides," he added, leaning conspiratorially towards the camera, "we all know you're here to promote your new dramatic role. Playing a tortured artist must be a real stretch for you, eh?" He winked. The audience hooted. Statham stared straight ahead, his eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the studio lights. Bryn could practically feel the tension radiating off him. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that whatever Statham was about to do, it wouldn't be pretty. She braced herself, a knot forming in her stomach. The air crackled with anticipation, thick with the unspoken threat of a carefully constructed facade about to shatter. The challenge. "So, Jason," Rex drawled, leaning back in his leather chair as if settling in for a juicy gossip session, "you've traded explosions for iambic pentameter, gone from cracking skulls to cracking Shakespeare. What spurred this? Evolution. Statham forced a smile. "Evolution's a strong word, Rex. I just fancied a change. Always been a fan of the classics." He shifted in his seat, the studio lights suddenly feeling hotter. He'd expected the usual banter about his action films, maybe a gentle ribbing about the inevitable baldness jokes. This felt different, predatory. "A fan," Rex repeated, his voice dripping with skepticism. He tapped a manicured finger against his teeth. "Right. So, tell me, Jason, what's your favorite line from, say, Hamlet?" Statham swallowed, the dryness in his mouth intensifying. He hadn't prepared for a pop quiz on Elizabethan drama. "To be or not to be is fairly iconic," he offered lamely. Rex chuckled, a short, sharp sound that echoed unervingly in the sudden silence of the studio. "Iconic, yes, but can you recite it? With feeling, of course. Show us that classical training we've all heard so much about." The audience tittered nervously. Statham felt a prickle of anger rising in his chest, a familiar heat that he usually channeled into choreographed fight scenes. He was being baited. He could feel it. "Look, Rex, I'm not here to." Rex cut him off, his voice hardening. "Not here to what, Jason? Embrace your new artistic direction. Are you ashamed of it? Afraid you'll expose yourself as what? an actor playing at being an actor. The audience gasped. The air crackled with tension. Statham's knuckles whitened as he gripped the armrests of his chair. This wasn't just uncomfortable. It was deliberate humiliation. He met Rex's gaze, a cold, calculating look that sent a shiver down his spine. The man wasn't just trying to get a rise out of him. He was trying to break him. "I think what the people want to know," Rex continued, his voice now almost a purr, "is whether Jason Statham, action hero extraordinaire, can actually act." He paused for effect, letting the words hang in the air. "So, let's settle this once and for all. Right here, right now." He snapped his fingers, and a stagehand scurried onto the set, carrying a battered copy of Romeo and Juliet. Rex flipped it open, his eyes scanning the pages. "Ah, yes, perfect." He looked up at Statham, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Let's see you tackle Romeo's death scene. You know, the bit where he realizes Juliet's dead and decides to join her in the afterlife. Can you handle the emotional complexity, the raw vulnerability?" The challenge hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Statham stared at the book, at the unfamiliar words that suddenly felt like a personal insult. He could refuse, walk off the show, salvage some shred of dignity. But something deep inside him, a stubborn refusal to be intimidated, began to stir that he wouldn't give Rex Sterling the satisfaction. Not today. Not ever. He took a deep breath, the stale studio air filling his lungs. "Fine," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Let's do it." Turning the tables. "All right, Rex," Statham said. The words clipped, each one landing with a surprising force that cut through the studio chattered. He felt the heat rising in his neck, a familiar burn that usually preceded a fight. But this felt different. This was a fight for something more than just pride. "I accept." A ripple went through the audience. Rex, who had been leaning back in his chair with a smug grin plastered on his face, straightened up so fast he almost knocked over his designer water. "You accept?" he stammered, momentarily thrown off balance. He'd clearly expected Statham to back down, to laugh it off as a joke. Statham leaned forward, his blue eyes locking onto Rex's. "That's right. I accept your little acting challenge, but with one condition." "And what's that?" Rex asked, recovering his composure, though a flicker of unease danced in his eyes. "You participate too." The studio erupted. Murmurs, gasps, and even a few outright laughs filled the air. Rex's face flushed a rather unattractive shade of puce. "Me? Act? Jason, I'm a seasoned interviewer, a celebrated personality. I haven't acted since high school." "Exactly," Statham said, his voice dangerously low. "So you're saying you're scared?" The barb hit its mark. Rex puffed out his chest, playing to the audience. "Scared? Don't be ridiculous. I'm just saying it would be unprofessional." "Unprofessional to have a little fun?" Statham challenged, raising an eyebrow. "Or unprofessional to risk exposing yourself?" He pressed on, smelling blood in the water. "Come on, Rex, live a little. What's the matter?" Afraid the audience might see past the carefully constructed facade. The bait was too tempting. Rex, ever the showman, couldn't resist the opportunity to prove his superiority, to demonstrate that he could do anything he set his mind to. He straightened his tie, smoothed his already impeccably groomed hair, and forced a smile. "All right, Statham. You're on. But if I win, you have to publicly declare that I'm a better actor than you." Statham smirked, a genuine, unsettling expression that sent a shiver down the spine of one of the cameramen. "And if I win?" Rex waved his hand dismissively. "If you win, which you won't, I'll donate $10,000 to your charity of choice." "Generous," Statham said dryly. "Now, the scene. I get to choose it, right?" Rex nodded, already regretting his impulsive decision. Statham paused, savoring the moment. He could have chosen something from his own filmography, something action-packed and physically demanding, but that wouldn't prove anything. That he needed something that required vulnerability, that demanded emotional depth. Hamlet, Act 3, Scene I. To be or not to be. Rex's face paled. The audience gasped again. This time in anticipation. He swallowed hard, his bravado momentarily deserting him. Shakespeare, the most famous soliloquy in the English language. It was a trap, expertly laid. But he was in too deep to back out now. He plastered a confident smile back on his face. "All right, Statham. Let's see what you've got." Hamlet. The spotlight hit Statham, and for a moment, it wasn't the granite-faced action hero standing there, but a man stripped bare. The opening lines of the to-be or not-to-be soliloquy, usually a theatrical cannon blast, emerged as a whisper, laced with an unexpected tremor. The years of playing hard man, of reducing complex emotions to a clenched jaw, seemed to meld away. He wasn't just reciting words. He was wrestling with them, with the very essence of existence. Bryn watched, mesmerized. The air crackled with a palpable energy that had nothing to do with the talk show's usual manufactured buzz. Statham's voice grew stronger, resonating with a quiet desperation that he paced the small stage, not with the calculated swagger of his film persona, but with a hesitant, almost vulnerable gait. The audience, initially primed for a train wreck, was silent, leaning forward, captivated. Then came Rex's cue that he minced onto the stage, draped in a ridiculously ornate gown clearly several sizes too large. His forced giggle grated against the sudden hush. "Oh, Hamlet, sweet Hamlet," he chirped, immediately forgetting the next line. He shuffled his feet, eyes darting to the teleprompter, which remained stubbornly blank. The silence stretched, punctuated only by Rex's increasingly frantic throat clearing. Statham, maintaining character with a focus Bryn wouldn't have believed possible, barely glanced at him. He continued the soliloquy, his voice a low rumble that seemed to drown out Rex's bumbling incompetence. "Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer." Statham's eyes, usually cold and calculating, now held a flicker of genuine torment. Bryn could see it in the subtle twitch of his jaw, the slight tremble in his hands, that he wasn't just acting. He was laying bare something raw and personal. Rex, meanwhile, was a disaster. He mumbled a disjointed sentence about flowers, his attempt at Ophelia's madness falling flat. The audience, initially amused, was now visibly cringing. That a few scattered coughs indicated growing impatience. Statham reached the climax of the soliloquy, his voice rising in a crescendo of anguish. "Thus conscience does make cowards of us all." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. He paused, his chest heaving. Rex seized the opportunity to interrupt, completely missing the emotional beat. "So, Hamlet, tell me," he simpered, adopting a mock-serious tone. "What's it really like kissing Uma Thurman?" The spell was broken. A collective groan rippled through the audience. Bryn felt a surge of anger. Rex, utterly tone-deaf, had just demolished something real, something powerful. She glanced at Statham, bracing herself for his reaction. His face was a mask, unreadable, but in his eyes, Bryn saw a flash of something that chilled her, a cold, simmering fury. The aftermath. Rex swallowed hard, the amplified sound grating against the sudden silence. The nervous laugh escaped him, strained. "Well, Jason, that was quite a turn. Didn't see that coming, did we, folks?" Polite applause trickled through the studio, a pale imitation of the thunderous ovation that had greeted Statham's impromptu Shakespeare. The cold sweat slicked Rex's skin. He had to wrest back control. "So," he began, leaning forward, feigning curiosity, "back to The Beekeeper, dominating the box office. How challenging is it to pivot from highbrow art to, let's say, more kinetic entertainment?" A subtle sneer colored the inquiry. Statham's smile widened, crinkling the corners of his eyes. Genuine warmth. "Not at all, Rex. I find pleasure in both. Keeps life interesting. Besides," he winked, "a spoonful of honey, you know." The audience roared with laughter and approval, a wave of sound washing over Rex. Heat crept up his neck that he started to interrupt, but Statham raised a hand, silencing him with surprising firmness. "Honestly," Statham said, his tone now earnest, direct, "I'm here to promote my picture. I respect your work, even if our approaches differ, but I also believe in authenticity, in embracing your passions, wherever they lead. So, thanks for having me, Rex, and thanks to everyone for tuning in." He rose, extending a hand. Taken aback, Rex hesitated almost imperceptibly before grasping it, the smile plastered on his face feeling brittle. Statham offered a final wave to the crowd, then glided off stage, disappearing into the shadows. The applause thundered. Rex stared, speechless, as his carefully constructed composure crumbled. He opened his mouth, but the acid retort died on his tongue. The clever words, the barbed comebacks, all evaporated, leaving him exposed, vanquished. Cut! The director barked, and the lights blazed, momentarily blinding Rex. He blinked, disoriented, as stagehands swarmed the set, dismantling the scene. The audience buzzed with chatter. Did you catch his face? Incredible. Statham just owned him. He fled the stage, heading straight for his dressing room, desperate to escape the judging gazes. From her perch near the sound booth, Brenda watched the fallout with a mixture of satisfaction and discomfort. Statham's performance had been masterful, a study in composure that he had deftly flipped the script on Rex, revealing the host's shallow ego. Yet, a part of her felt a pang of pity for Rex, laid bare in his humiliation. She gathered her belongings, the script pages seeming to weigh heavily in her grasp. Passing Rex's dressing room, she heard muffled shouting filtering through the slightly ajar door. She paused, then shook her head and kept walking. Outside, city lights dissolved in the rain-streaked taxi windows. She pondered Statham's words, his call for sincerity. She thought of Rex, the man she once looked up to, now revealed as a petty, insecure figure, and she considered herself, her own aspirations and compromises. Disillusionment settled heavily within her. Was this the world she truly wanted? Was this the toll of success? The questions churned within her, unanswered. One thing was clear. Tonight had shifted something inside. The future felt uncertain. Perhaps it was time for a change. Perhaps it was time to discover her own platform, her own voice, her own truth. The notion, both frightening and exciting, lingered like the earthy scent of rain.